Welcome to the Revenue Rewired podcast, hosted by StringCan Interactive's visionary CEO, Jay Feitlinger, and no-nonsense COO, Sarah Shepard. We're here to accelerate your revenue and give your marketing purpose. Hello, welcome everybody to this next and very special episode of the Revenue Rewired podcast. Again, I know you're all very sad that Jay isn't here, but I have someone even better, and that's Rob Nicoletti. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm happy to displace Jay once and for once in my life, I can take center stage above him. So I'm happy about this.
I know. I can't wait for him to listen to this one. Oh, well, I'll introduce Rob. Rob and I are great friends, and Rob's a seasoned strategist, a super data-driven operator, and a visionary builder who has spent over 20 years helping businesses, early stage and startups, and global enterprises alike, scaling smarter and executing with precision. Your career spans more than 40 industries, which is insane, and includes leadership on marketing, consulting, HR, technology. You've founded and scaled multiple companies. You've advised iconic brands like Ralph Lauren, Ritz-Carlton, PGA National, Four Seasons, love Four Seasons,
Me too.
Humana, and you've built systems that drive measurable performance in those highly competitive markets. And with that, you've now ventured into the founder of Halo. It's a breakthrough SaaS platform and executive operating framework. You're really redefining the future of work. Um, and Halo, if you're not familiar with it, I'll have a link in the show notes, but Halo brings clarity, alignment, and execution discipline to leadership teams, which we could all use more of. And it's special because it's supercharged by its AI consultant, Leo. And that enables organizations to increase revenue per employee without adding headcount. And Rob has also recently written a fantastic book called How Revenue Happens, which is why he makes the perfect guest for this podcast. Um, and so, Rob, you know, I feel like um, a lot of leaders have plans, best laid plans and all that, but their results often don't match the plan. The strategy isn't really failing in theory, it's the execution. I think strategy gets a bad rap because execution suffers. Um, and so this conversation is hopefully a masterclass in fixing what's actually broken so growth isn't just sort of haphazard or left to chance. And your book opens with this brutal truth. Most strategies die in the handoff. Talk to us about like what you've seen and why you came to that very specific conclusion.
Yeah, well, if you've ever heard, and hopefully your listeners are familiar with Mike Tyson, but Mike Tyson has a really great saying that basically everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And that I've experienced that first and foremost for my own businesses, but I've seen it hundreds, if not thousands, of times by working with companies at all stages, across the U.S. and so forth. A big part of why handoffs typically fail is because oftentimes executives, they'll build a plan. They'll spend 2 days off site. They'll talk about how they're going to conquer the world. And then what happens is they get back to reality, and everyone below them, who, by the way, is already overworked, overwhelmed, and they're kind of underperforming, they get busy doing their day jobs. And so more times than not, execution ends up failing because that strategy or the plan that they set out over those 2 days doesn't get handed down in a clear, actionable, and measurable way that can then get put into production. And so, oftentimes what happens is that it just doesn't get executed more times than not. I mean, do you remember growing up playing telephone? Do you remember that remember
Oh
that game?
yeah, I
Okay.
was bossy. I loved all those games.
There you go. So a big part is that unfortunately, even now, whether you're 4 years old or 74 years old, we're still playing telephone in organizations. And it's literally comes back to just having something that's clear, actionable, and measurable. And so, what I've seen holistically is that misalignment happens because what the C-suite or executives are saying they want to accomplish doesn't really get translated down in, as I said, that clear, actionable, measurable way. So what happens is everyone that's there doing that work, they end up running in 10,000 different directions. They waste tons of their time and resources. And then in the end, none of the plans actually get to where they want it to go. And it's really unfortunate because it's happening faster and faster today because the world is moving faster and faster.
I think it's so crazy to me because you're so not wrong. I've seen it a million times. In fact, I'm sure string can suffered similarly before. Not that I'm special or anything, but there is something about that whole execution is such a huge role, and strategy is just a nice to have until you have the ability to execute it. And in Halo, you have this structure where you have marketing owns awareness,
Hmm.
sales owns relationships, and ops owns reputation.
Hmm.
Why is it that naming those helps move strategy from like gathering dust?
Well, two things. One, and maybe we should have this conversation as well, is that strategy is such a diluted word. It's almost like talking about wellness. It means nothing to everyone and everything to no one, right? And so part of this is helping companies understand what is strategy. And so we have a very simple way of helping organizations identify strategy by asking one simple question, which is if I was an organization, how do we create more value for whether it's prospects or clients or employees or our own brand? And the answer to that are the actual strategies, and those are ways to put them into action. So one thing that always boggled my mind is, when I would go into organizations who I knew were already misaligned, I'd ask them that question, how do you define strategy? Before we then get into the 6R framework. And why we developed the 6R framework, which is what you're alluding to in terms of marketing owns awareness, or what we call about recognition. A big part of that is to basically keep leadership teams in alignment. I'm sure you've experienced this working within organizations, especially in marketing. People are very territorial about what they own within an organization. If I'm marketing, I don't want HR to talk to me or even comment on what we're doing. If I'm operations, I don't want marketing to comment on operations. But what we need is we needed kind of like a Rosetta Stone. We needed to all get on the same page because we're all trying to get to the same place. And so a big part of why we developed this 6R structure, like you said, marketing owns recognition or awareness. Business development, and sales owns relationships. Ops owns reputation, and it keeps going. There's recruitment, that's HR, retention is service, and revenue is finance. But a big part of this is because it allows everyone that's has a seat at the table to talk together and nobody steps on each other's toes. We also use this as a way to define what is the outcome we're looking for. Yes, we want to leverage marketing to build recognition for our company, our brand, our product, or service. We want to leverage business development and sales to build the right relationships, right? We want to use our operations, the way we deliver our products and service, to build our reputation. And when we have that conversation, we use that vernacular, then everyone at the executive level, everyone can have their piece of the conversation pie, if that makes sense. So we use it as an alignment tool, and it works really, really well. In fact, I had a board of director. I was in working with an organization, and the chairman came up to me afterward and said, "I feel like I just saw the Matrix, because within a matter of 2 or 3 minutes, everybody on the table is all talking about, yeah, we have to improve our recognition, or our relationships are not right. We got to recruit better. Retention is a problem." He said he would never look at business the same way in terms of like, okay, what is marketing's job here? What's operations job here? We have one job, and the one job is to get us to revenue. We need to make revenue happen. And the way we make revenue happen is through these 6 R's: build recognition, build the right relationships, build our reputation, recruit the right way, retain our customers and our employees, and revenue takes care of itself at the end. So that's why we developed it that way. And it's a very powerful structure, but it's also a really simple structure at that.
Yeah, but like you said at the end of your book, simple isn't easy, right?
Never is.
You know
Never
what? I
is.
have to read like as you were saying reputation, my brain was like find that part. And in your book, I had highlighted this stat that was bananas to me that a dissatisfied customer will tell between 9 and 15 people about their experience. And I could hear, people saying, "Well, I don't understand how reputation affects revenue," but holy cow, that's nuts. I mean, how does it not
Entirely.
affect revenue at that point, right?
100%. And you got to remember that, a lot of what I have built with Halo and even the 6R framework, it all ties back to ignore business. The fact is we're human beings and human beings operate at a very, very base level, right? Our primitive brain, we're all looking to build relationships, communities, so forth and so on. And we make almost 84% of our decisions based on reputation. So if you don't believe that reputations affect revenue. I mean, think about the way you look at Yelp reviews before you choose a restaurant to go to, right? I can't remember the exact stat, but I think there's a stat in the book that talks about how the difference between a 4-star and a 5-star review, I believe it represents an 18 or 24% difference in revenue. That should be clarity in terms of everyone's brain, in terms of why operations is so vital in reputation building. Most people don't understand that. And that's the reputation piece is one of the areas that I have most conversations with executives around because in the beginning, they're like, well, how does operations affect a reputation? And once I explain it, then the light bulb goes off and they clearly see the way that it aligns to revenue.
That's shocking, but I guess that's part of where marketing gets hung up a lot too, is it's sometimes quote intangible, the results that come from it. But I love that your
Yeah.
framework, to your point, it is simple, like, and I think that's hard for a lot of people that they feel like it should be more complex. Like my problems are special, it should be really hard to solve. But by simplifying, I think your point, what I really loved about the book was here are some, honestly, the fixes are pretty easy, reprioritize your most troublesome R. And you give a great framework on how to gauge the pain and move through those R's in a systematic way that's not overwhelming. You're actually getting some momentum and some progress. And so, talk to me a little bit more about like the Halo framework and what helped you build that, because it's more than just, it's like a true operating system, and you've got a lot of experience too, where I didn't even mention that you also own an agency in our intro. So, you have quite a bit of insider knowledge
Mhm.
um, into both sides of this coin. So,
Yeah, and a big part of it is because I'm a really sneaky person. So I use marketing as a Trojan horse. I've always been a very curious entrepreneur. I use marketing as a way to get into an organization. And once I was in, I was just like a pinball. I basically moved around from HR to ops to finance to service because I was just so curious. And one thing I found out by working with hundreds of companies, and you said it, every organization is basically the same. They have the same problems. They have the same building blocks. In fact, I even say in the book, my mom growing up used to say to me, everyone's got the same problems, just a different mailbox. And that's entirely true for organizations. People think that their problems are so unique, but they're not. The 6 R's, marketing, sales, ops, HR, service, and finance, with the 6 R's, they're identical. These are the building blocks, right? And the reason why I also built this framework was because I left a meeting. I was working with one of the largest credit unions in the Southwest. And I left the meeting with their executive team and I met with the startup company within about an hour difference. And I literally had the same conversations and heard the same problems. And what I realized was, okay, well, we need a framework, a way that we can all bring this together. And a lot of it comes back to, and you'll probably attest to this, that just like I said, people don't really have a clear defined what is strategy. nobody really understands what marketing is. Everyone thinks either marketing is about graphic design or revenue generation, and it's neither of those two. Really, the point of marketing is to communicate, to build awareness and recognition for what we're doing. It's not necessarily just to drive demand generation. And so I realized that, a lot of times we needed, like I said, this Rosetta Stone. And so I developed this framework that not only defines the key points of building a business, but also that would allow us to create an operating system that almost any organization can work within. And I've proven the fact that any organization can, as long as you have accountability and follow through. That's a big piece of the puzzle as well. And that's with
Yeah.
any plan. I mean, I'll joke around here, but my wife, she goes to see a personal trainer. I went to see that same personal trainer. My wife followed through, and she's fit as all hell. Me, I look like I just walked out of the cookie aisle, right? And so there's a difference, right? And the difference is the follow through, right? And that's a big part of plans and the execution piece. But if you follow the framework, it's super simple and it's very efficient.
One of my favorite stories, and you had told me this story in person when we talked, but reading it in the book, I was kind of like, whoa, I got more detail. It was your healthcare persona, like your internal story. I don't want to give too much away because I want you to tell that story. I think that one's really impactful because, again, to the point of marketing, that was like an inside job and it affected revenue in such a profound way, but it really wasn't external facing initially.
You got to forgive me because I'm trying to remember exactly
It
which
was
one you're
your
talking about.
Florida, the sales rep persona.
Oh, was it for
Um,
Humana?
yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So when we were working with Humana, they came to us because they were struggling a little bit with breaking into the Florida market. And they were convinced that they had a marketing problem. And their marketing problem was, they obviously wanted all the individuals in Florida to use their pharmaceutical offering, right, for Humana. And so when I was meeting with their executive team, I was talking to them and I said, "Well, what makes you think this is a marketing problem?" And they told me all the reasons why. But when we actually dug into it, what we realized was it wasn't a marketing problem. It wasn't a recognition problem. It was a people problem. It was a recruitment problem. And so I asked them, "Well, have you ever developed personas, design personas for your sales team specifically?" And the room went silent. They did not have an answer. And so one thing I said to them, well, part of the problem, it sounds like to me, is that we're not recruiting the right people that meet the need of what we're trying to get to. And it was a very simple solve. It wasn't a marketing solve. I mean, in some ways you can say it because marketing, one of the things that most marketing companies do is build out personas. And so that was an easy, clear path to solving a problem that was really misalignment. They were recruiting the wrong people to get them to where they wanted to go. So I think again that was a fun one too. Now I could have done the marketing. I could have went like, well, we could do all these marketing campaigns. You could pay us a lot of money to do this, but in the end, I basically said, let's develop personas so you can recruit better, so you can drive revenue, and that was a solve for them.
What were some of the questions you asked them that you think probably helped speed up the recognition and awareness of where their problem was? Because I know you do a good job of asking questions that other people don't ask, or they just don't ask them the way you do. If you can't remember, like what would Rob now
I'm
ask
I'm
them?
I'm trying to remember the exact questions. And again, I'm from the East Coast, so I talk really fast and I move really fast. And so I vaguely remember, and I think when we worked with Humana, it was probably about 6 or 7 years ago. I think that was. So I'm trying to remember what that was. But when I bubble up to 30,000 feet, when I go in and talk to organizations, the question that I ask, I want to get to the root of the problem. I don't want to hear I try to filter through essentially the noise to get to the root cause, and I use something called interrogatory questions. which I learned from this book called Start With No. It's actually a negotiating book, and it's an amazing book, but I use it every day. I use it when I'm working with my kids, my wife, clients, anyone. It helps me get to the root much faster. And so part of its understanding is like, well, where do you see this problem stemming from? Why do you see it that way? Who can help make this problem go away? What do you believe causes this? And by going through these interrogatory questions, who, what, when, why, where, and how, essentially we get to the root of where the problem was stemming from. So when we were talking, if I could remember correctly, we were talking, I was asking them marketing related questions using the interrogatory way. And then I would do follow-ups because I had an inkling. It's almost very like detective work. Once I was able to uncover one stone, I was able to, like, okay, I see where this pattern is going to. And I was able to quickly get them to exactly what the problem is. I didn't write about this in the book, but we did the same thing with the American Red Cross. When I was having conversations with the Red Cross, they were coming to us as an agency to help solve some bigger problems. But it was through my questions that I said, hey, this is not a marketing problem. You have an ops challenge. And at that point, I didn't have Halo stood up, but we guide them in the right way to go get the operations needed to get there. And we've done this with many organizations, large and small. So I don't think I answered your question, but I'm trying to in that sense too. So my apologies if
No,
I
I
didn't.
think you did because what it is Jay and I actually just recorded a podcast this week that we'll put out, and it was about asking questions. And I think marketers really pigeonhole themselves by asking the wrong question,
Agreed.
like the example I said, it's very simple, but if you're in a relationship and you say, "How was your day?" That's like, okay, or what was the best part of your day? What was the part of your day that you
Yes.
wished would have gone differently? And in a way, it's like a, capital smart question, but it's it's also not leading with, I don't care what your answer is because I'm asking you the same question everybody else asks. I
Yep.
think it shows a little bit more care. And I think that's what you got to with Humana is I'm not trying, like, maybe you went into it without trying to solve a marketing problem. I think you always think big picture anyway, even as a marketer. And you're like, I know there's another problem in here. And that's why, you've moved into Halos. There are bigger problems to solve. They're not all marketing problems, but marketing has a piece in many of them, but it's a system wide issue. And then how do you, as an organization, layer in those solutions to create momentum and thus grow your bottom line?
Precisely. That's very well said. In fact, can you start coming over to my side and doing business development for us? Because you do such a good way of explaining that. But you're entirely correct. That was beautifully summed up entirely.
Yeah, I think being a marketer is probably one of the things that helped you, like being a good marketer, because the whole questions piece and why, and now that I'm saying it out loud, after having read your book, you actually ask a lot of questions in there. Like
Hmm.
even the whole end sections when you're gauging how you're feeling about each of the R's is really all about the question, how are you feeling? And you tailor it to the section. It wasn't the same question repeated for every chapter. It was very custom, and it helped. I actually was thinking like very differently with each of those sections, and I had to be sort of honest with myself when I was going through the worksheet portion of it.
Can I add
Yeah.
on top of that? One
Yeah.
thing that I would recommend that anyone, and this is one thing I love about the Halo methodology. So what you're talking about is there's sections in the book, and I do this with companies where we ask them to rate their pain. So if anyone's ever experienced pain in their life, whether you've given birth or you've gone to a hospital, and they show you the chart of all the happy faces, sad faces, happy face, no pain, grimace face, I'm about to pass out, right? And so we do this with executive teams to show how misaligned they actually are. Well, we'll talk about, okay, when it comes to marketing or recognition, relationships, reputation, recruiting, retention, revenue, tell us how painful you believe it is for your organization. And it's wild because you'll get the complete opposite end of the spectrums from even small leadership teams of 4 to 5 people. They will just their perception and their feeling about where pain is coming from for their organization, whether they see pain through marketing or sales or ops, or HR service or finance. We do that specifically because you might rate, if we were to do this for string can, you might rate reputation as, a one or a two, little pain. Jay may rate it as a seven or eight, right? And it's not even about the score, it's about the misalignment. And then when we have dialogue around that, now we're starting to get into alignment. So that's where the questions, we want to leverage questions to get to the deeper rooted issue. And yes, we do that specifically from a psychological aspect to get people to open up and talk about their perception and feeling. And that's the best part about being coming from marketing, because we're communication, right? That's a whole part of it.
Well, and on that, one of the challenges that someone has, and you and I have seen it a ton of times, it feels like I have a lot of problems. I have no idea where to start with solving my problems. The biggest hurdle was getting alignment. What the heck do I do now?
And that's a huge piece. And that's where a lot of companies, especially smaller size companies, they'll ask us like, well, where do we start? And part of it is, if I have a toothache, but I broke my ankle, where am I gonna focus first? Not the toothache. I'm gonna get my ankle taken care of, right? And so part of it is like, well, where do you have the most amount of pain? I have the most amount of pain either and most of the time it's like, well, revenue. Okay, well, where is that stemming from? It's coming from a lack of sales or a high turnover rate, right? And so part of that is identifying where the root problem is coming from so we can triage that first. And once we triage that, then it's very easy to get everything else in alignment. We did
And I
this
think,
just to give, oh, sorry, go
oh,
ahead.
go, no, no, go ahead. Give me your
I was
story.
going to tell you. So there's another healthcare company we work with called Innovatel, amazing company. And they came to, I think I talk about in the book, they came to us right when COVID hit. They're a telepsych company, an amazing company. If anyone remembers COVID, anything tele did hella well, right? At that point. But they were spiraling. Like they lost so much traction. They came to us in October or November, right as COVID was, basically taking full effect. And they were just completely misaligned. And we used the Halo methodology with them. By the end of Q1 of that following year, which was about 3 months in, their revenue increased by over 300%. And it was really about getting them more in alignment with their target audiences and their messaging and focusing on training up their salespeople to be more effective, right? To ask the questions and to get people through it. And with that for that year we worked with them for 2 years, but in that year they went from basically spiraling to increasing rev by 300 some odd percent. They raised the series B, which the investors said they invested specifically because of the work that we had done with them. And then a year later they were acquired and the founder exited, right? That to me is like a huge success story. And it wasn't anything great that we did, we just helped them get into alignment by asking really good questions.
I love that story because these companies are like doing great things. They're just not able to break this ceiling or
Yes.
whatever it is. And part of that is the analysis paralysis of the too many problems. And I think Halo is one of those frameworks that gives you permission to focus.
Mhm.
And it's
It's a great
odd
term.
how you almost need like permission to focus on one thing because I I think it might have been toward the middle of the book where you talked about you have to build some sort of like credibility and momentum with the team too,
Yes,
so that they can see the progress is possible. Yeah.
that's entirely true. You want me
Well,
to
speaking
elaborate on?
of progress, I do want to talk about AI with you because
Great.
Leo is such a super cool tool, and we just had a great presentation in our team this morning, so everyone's brains are totally spinning on GEO, and I've been reading your articles recently, which are like this week seems especially nuts with articles. But let's talk about how Leo has been layered and what you've done with that, and basically how you're overcoming this. AI is like this general thing, kind of like strategy. I was in a webinar
Yeah.
yesterday and she goes, AI has this frame like strategy. It
Hmm.
means nothing
Nothing.
until you do something with it. And I was like, that is such a great way to look at it. So talk to
Yep.
me about that.
Yeah, I think at the top level, even before I dive deep into Leo, I think you're absolutely right. Like what I'm seeing is that everyone is now rushing towards using AI in every possible way possible. But AI, like I said about strategy, it means nothing. Just because you say AI doesn't mean that you actually know what AI is or AI does. And I'm seeing that more and more, right? You get on LinkedIn, and it's just a flood of AI, and I do my best to try to fit into those avenues, but at a high level. People don't really understand what AI is about, right? And the way I describe it is very simply you should be thinking about AI like riding an e-bike. Have you ever ridden an e-bike?
I actually have not. I've ridden a regular
Okay.
bike.
All right. So you know what it's like to ride a regular bike, let's say up a hill. Getting on an e-bike is basically just helps you go faster and further with less effort. You still have to pedal. And that's going to be the misconception with artificial intelligence. People think that AI is just going to take everything away from them, that they're not going to have to think, they're not going to have to do anything. And that's the wrong way to look at artificial intelligence and leveraging it within business. You really have to have an objective. You have to have a reason. You have to have a causality of why you want to use artificial intelligence. And then to use it within your business, you also have to use data. You have to have at least a line of sight with your own data in order to make it efficient and effective. One thing that we identified years ago, I was actually on a call. I got a call from one of my favorite clients. She was amazing. And she basically said, Rob, we love working with you. You're amazing, so forth and so on. But here's a problem. There's only one of you. There's no way that you're going to be able to grow or scale your business with just one of you. So unless you're able to clone yourself, that was the light bulb moment for me. Unless you're able to close yourself, you're never going to get to where you want to go. And this was probably in 2016 or 17. And so I already knew that in order, the framework was working really well. I knew I had to clone myself and make a better version. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go on the path before ChatGPT, before everything else, and I'm going to build machine learning and artificial intelligence to build an AI business consultant, replace myself is what I wanted to do. And Leo is exactly that. Leo is an acronym, just like Halo. It stands for leveraging executive objectives. Every executive within an organization has clear objectives. And so they typically go out and hire consultants or they work with others in order to get questions answered, build SOPs, build plans, reports, insights, get data. And so we had to build something so that we can accelerate the adoption and execution for executives. And that's what Leo does. Leo is it's an AI consultant, but it's an amalgam of agents. One thing we built into Leo is that has a data scientist side of it and a data analyst. Right now, Leo benchmarks at a senior analyst level, right? We want to get Leo to a PhD by the end of the year. What does that mean? Basically, Leo helps every executive ask and answer anything about their business around sales, marketing, ops, HR, service, and finance, because that's what's needed in today's world. Executives need to move faster. They need to be on that e-bike, not the regular bike that's, you're pedaling uphill. And so that's what Leo has been built to do. We integrate all your data so Leo knows everything about you. We build what's called Cortex, which is the brain of Leo. So Leo knows everything about the anatomy of your business, all of your target audiences, everything that's happening in the world around you. It connects, data around marketing, sales, ops, HR, service, and finance in a completely protective way. We don't use ChatGPT. We don't use Perplexity. But Leo is built. You could ask it, how are we doing in the Atlanta market? How many screws did I sell yesterday? Give me a forecast in terms of how this product is going to sell next quarter. Give me an analysis on what's happening in one area of my business. And it really is just the accelerator for an executive.
Now, agree or disagree, because this is such a bad beep tool. um,
Yeah.
Agree or disagree, the one thing that will make that so much more successful for any business is having good data.
100%. And this is one of the misconceptions with our true artificial intelligence. AI can only accelerate based on data. And so this is both an obstacle and an opportunity for every organization because we're at this inflection point or this fulcrum point, if you will, that everybody knows they need to go from the Flintstones to the Jetsons, which is exactly why I built Halo and Leo to help you do this. Part of that transition is getting data ready. So no matter what, you have to go through this process, right? Companies are already spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars a year on tools and data. and it's all crap. Only 3% of data is actually useful, right? But in order for you to get to where you want to go, you got to correct that data. So when are you going to start? Are you going to start in 3 years when you're already a dinosaur? Or are you going to start today? And so part of what we help companies do and what Leo does, Leo actually scans the data and tells you exactly where you have gaps. It tells you where you have, and it builds improvement plans around data. It's not a very difficult process, to be frank. But what it does, again, it provides you a clear objective. We need to go from inoperable data to operational data. And we want to do that in 90 days around marketing, sales, ops, HR service, and finance. So it gives clarity and alignment even from a data standpoint. But you're 100% right. Data is a key point. But we work with companies that have no data or have really crappy data, and they're operationalized very quickly as a result of working in the framework.
Now, is it, chicken egg situation better for that organization to spend time focusing on like an end result, some sort of desired outcome, goal, rock, BHAG, you name it?
Mhm.
Or should they figure out the ways to structure their data first to then clean it up?
No, you can't do it. My recommendation is you do both of them in parallel because part of it is setting clear objectives. First thing we do is work with a company. Where do you want to be in 3 years? We always focus on 3 years. 36 months is more tangible. And part of that process is that most, if not all companies, they want to be making data-driven decisions. So we back out a 3-year plan. But part of that is setting those quarterly objectives. It's nothing to do with data, nothing to do with AI. In fact, that's one thing we talk about. I have a happy argument with our CRO because most companies are talking about that they're AI first. We're not. We use AI to accelerate a methodology is already proven without artificial intelligence, without data purity, if you will. So it is my recommendation that you do both at the same time. You actually focus on better, clear, actionable, and measurable plans. Because even if you're tracking data manually, you're still going to be tracking the right data at that point. And whether or not you fix it through, HubSpot or Salesforce or QuickBooks or any Epicor or Paylocity, doesn't matter. You're going to be fixing that while you're still doing your plan and executing against and getting against that. Because it's not just about data. It's not just about AI. It's about aligning your team so you could be more efficient and effective and get to predictable reoccurring revenue, right? That's where everybody wants to go.
I think AI is part of the ecosystem, but if your like ecosystem needs some serious work, it's not going to do anything but add noise to it, you know?
No,
So
and I've yet, just so you know too, I say this all the time. I have never walked into an organization. I've worked with thousands of executives, hundreds of companies, and so forth. I've yet to walk into an organization where they have clean data. I work with companies they spent the last year and a half trying to get their data into Snowflake, right? Or they have all these Power BI dashboards, or they have all these data warehouses, data lakes, but they're all garbage. And until we come in and give them a focus, we give them a destination, then they have a clear path to actually structuring that data appropriately.
hmm. Well, I highly recommend, if our listeners need a book to read right now, it's How Revenue Happens. It's really a fantastic book. And I'm not just saying that because Rob's my friend. Check out his website, haloforall as well.com. And you can get How Revenue Happens wherever you buy books. And Rob, this was such an awesome conversation. I could talk to you like for days. And so we'll have to pick this up and do another one in the future. But thank you so much for your
Absolutely.
time.
It was my pleasure. And yeah, I would actually, you and I can talk forever. I agree with you. And anytime I'm invited back, put Jay in the closet and I'm happy to jump on.
I know. I told him we'll figure out a way to do it. So I facilitate a conversation between him and someone else. So it'll be
Yeah,
a
I'll
circus.
do it. That'll be great. Thank you again. I really
Awesome.
enjoyed my time. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
Abby.
Have a great day. Thanks for tuning in to the Revenue Rewired podcast. Send us your questions to podcast@stringcaninteractive.com and follow us for more insights to drive your business forward.